Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another History of Dawn or BSS-01 set review, today featuring Purple. If you love deleting cards, removing cores, drawing a bunch of extra cards, and having just a horde of undead armies or serpents, this is going to be the color for you. Now, I learned a little bit from my last video, so we're going to kind of do this a little bit differently. We're just having all the vanillas up front and talk about archetypes at a high level, and then hopefully speed through cards a little bit faster while still giving them their due justice and covering the goods and bad parts of them. But I also want to do another kind of housekeeping thing really quick at the start of the video. I apologize. I have been sick the past couple days, so there's been a slightly change in the video schedule, and the person I was supposed to record with is actually undergoing surgery. Nothing major, it sounds like, but just won't be able to record. So we're going to skip over the last starter deck video, and this weekend I'm going to be printing out proxies, and we're just going straight into History of Dawn or Set 1 testing. So because we'll have the full spoiler here, or at least red, purple, and white by this weekend, and yellow will trickle in over the next week. It's a good opportunity for us to just record the games and get some actual gameplay out there. That's, full power, so to say. So starting things off, as I mentioned, we're just going to have the vanillas out front. We have Undead, Serpents, Spirit Beast, and Shadow as like the four types we've seen. Now that we've seen more spoilers for both Purple, and then we're going to do a video on White very, very soon, there is probably actual zero room for vanilla spirits in set 1. There's just too many good cards to be running. And even with some of the Nexus cards we've seen that care about, say, Star Dragon or Serpents or things of that nature, there's enough of those cards that you're going to have in your deck anyways that are already good cards that you're not, even when you're trying to run these like heavy serpent themed decks, you don't need to run the vanillas. So great for lore. That is the one thing I really like that Bandai has done. Like, they're not just vanillas and you throw them away. Is there's actually some very relevant lore on these. And if you go back and read all the flavor text and all the cards, they've done a really good job on world building. So I'm not going to say anything more than that. Vanilla spirits, they're vanilla spirits. There's probably not room for them at any point. They're good for the lore extensions that they add on, and you couldn't fit some of the more lengthy flavor text boxes on the other cards, so they're good at filling that role, but ultimately just not excited by any of them. And that's kind of what we'd expect, right? Vanilla cards generally don't have a place in card game metas, or if they do, it's very, very niche, and you're playing them for like some secondary effect where, like in One Piece right now, you're just discarding them for the 2K block, and that's it, right? So nothing to really get excited about. They're vanillas, they do vanilla things, and you go on. Moving on from that point, we do have kind of the three main archetypes that we're going to see. And what I mean by that is like style of deck that you're going to have. So I'm going to cover each one of these cards in more detail when they come up later. But just as a way to start thinking about it as you're, either watching or listening to this video, is we have Queen Maduke, who's going to be the curse strategy, which has a lot of aggressive spirits that want to just attack through, and they have death touch, to use the magic term, right? So making it really awkward for your opponent to block. And they actually have quite a bit of draw in that archetype as well. So it's just constantly shuffling through your deck and putting aggressive pressure on, and then eventually getting into Queen Maduke, who's going to make things stick on your board and really make things difficult for your opponent to, you can't remove their threats anymore because now you're getting life burned, and just a very solid X-Rare. Moving on from that, we have Dread Knight Nemesis, which is going to be more of like the on destroyed or destroyed for value. I don't know what to call it yet, but it's just like getting value for destroying cards sort of thing. So as we're talking through this, there's going to be a lot of different cards that either say when destroyed, or things that you want to go to your graveyard because you're going to get them back. So if you want to play more of it's called Aristocrat is what the magic term would be. And I don't know what other games have ever given it a proper term, but if you know what that term means, you're very excited for this type of deck because it does that very well. And it has just some more card draw value baked in and like spicy on play effects. Like, it's just a very solid deck all around. This is probably the one that I'm most looking forward to. I don't think it's the strongest out of the three, but I think it has the most room for deck expression and for different like flex choices that you can bring in because of how some of the cards are worded, which I'll talk about later. And then the last one, which plays off very well from the X-Rare in the starter, is also just the depletion archetype. Now, it is fair that these cards can fit very well into the two previously mentioned archetypes, but there's also just enough cards that, there's only so many room for spirits that you could very well and very reasonably just play a purely core depletion based deck and have these cards like the Infernal King Curse Dragon, which gets you insane value when you deplete things to 0. And then, of course, the Dark King Snake just deletes stuff himself. So That last option is going to be more like your heavy control, like really grind down the game to a halt, and just have a lot of like value spells or creatures that remove cores and then delete your opponent's spirits that way. So I really do like kind of up front, we have 3 very different style of decks. And again, here's where the gets a little gray area, because yes, the destroyed effect is also going to play like a mid-range / very slow control deck, and then depletion by nature plays like a very slow mid-range / control deck. So those two are kind of muddied together a little bit, and I think we will definitely see some overlap between them. But then Queen Madook does give us a second and or third option, with being a bit more aggressive and having that like death touch strategy built in. So very excited to see where that goes. But now let's actually get into purple and start talking about the cards themselves. So as we mentioned, Grand Underworld Trio Queen Madook, 8 costs with 4 reduction. So this is very, very expensive for a top end card. That said, it is a game-winning card by itself. If you can stick this on the board and get its Blood Curse ability, you're going to be feeling pretty great about it. So at level 1, 2, and 3, so 5 for 1, 6 for 3, and 11 for 6. It's really nice that it's a 5k on enter too. That does help you play around things like Flame Breath. If one of your other spirits trigger it, right, they could target this one instead. So the 5k is really, really nice to see here. Going up to 3 on level 2 for the Blood Curse is nice because what the effect does. But again, this is getting very, very expensive for what we assume to be a lower to the ground curve style of deck. And this is just something that you play at the top end as like your finisher. So when one of your spirits with Curse or Blood Curse reduces your opponent's life, place the lost life cores into the void instead of their reserve. So that's really, I just want to repeat that, into the void instead of their reserve. So you're removing that ramp side of it, right? One of the things about Battle Spirits is when you're in Battle Spirits Saga, right? When you're attacking your opponent, they can choose to take their life, and it's effectively ramping them. You're giving them more resources to work with. But now, if you're removing them, you're not giving them that catch-up mechanic that's built into the game. So it's a very strong denial just at level 1. And again, with your spirits having curse, and because some of the way the cards have been worded, other than like Elk, I think is the only one that gets around it at this point, your 2-drop curse spirit is going to take out an 8 cost from white, right? Because it doesn't select. It is just a static ability that's on the card. So curse is very strong in the right matchups. And of course, Blood Curse, getting onto the second part, level 2 and level 3, when this spirit would be destroyed by your opponent, you may place 1 core from your opponent's life and 1 core from this spirit into their owner's trashes to keep this spirit refreshed. So again, just a crazy life burn effect. You know, the kind of pro or con, and, you know, kind of which side of this coin that you're on, it's like curse units are generally very weak, and they're going to die to your opponent's unit is going to die to the curse effect anyways. But now you're just going to be able to trigger this Blood Curse repeatedly. So the way I see this going out, and then I guess the last part too, level 3, all your spirits with curse gain Blood Curse, right? That's the important part. This really does feel like, and 6 cores is so much. Like paying this, like sure, you pay the 4 cores and put 1 on it, right? So that's 5 cores in a turn. And then you're pumping this thing up to 6 on the next turn. That is a heavy, heavy investment for this deck. So rightfully, it should be a game ender when it comes down. You obviously have to pass a turn. It's very rare, unless it's much, much later in the game, that you're going to be able to play this and immediately ramp it to 6 while having enough spirits on board to close the game. But effectively, if you refresh with this on the board, you should be winning, right? It does have a very, very strong game-ending effect, and it's only going to take a few curse units that then get upgraded to Blood Curse to finish the game. So this is one that I think really has to be built out and see where curse lines up with the effects and like which ones you want to run, while also having enough like control delay effects, while also having removal still baked in. So there's a lot that this card's going to be doing. Definitely want to see this as like a 3 of. I don't think you can ever afford to run 4 just because it's going to be very, very expensive, and seeing it early is probably going to be awful, but absolutely going to be a staple for the curse deck. And then, of course, because it has Blood Curse, if we get more curse stuff in set 2 and set 3, it would be really hard to imagine a world where you don't just keep this card. So this is one, if you really like this style of gameplay, make sure you buy these X rares early, because it may be more difficult to find with set 2 and set 3 coming out and set 1 not being reprinted as much. But that's a market watch video, as it were, for a different day. Moving on from there, we have King Snake Quetzalcoatl, 5 with 2 cost reduction. When summoned, select a spirit with curse or Blood Curse, so it does get back Madook there as well, in your trash and return it to your hand. And then when the spirit attacks, select one of your opponent's spirits that has 1 core on it and destroy it. So this is where it starts to get interesting. The level 1, level 2, because obviously it triggers in both conditions there. Getting a card back from your graveyard is perfect. Lets you recycle those curse units that, traded up in value, and it helps you kind of restock your hand so you at least have blockers. It's a 3K. It's kind of whatever. It goes up to 5K again, kind of whatever, that it's not doing much by itself. But this is a card that you're playing it for the revival effect, not because it's like the strongest attacker. Beyond that, though, is the when the spirit attacks, select one of your opponent's spirits, has one core on it, and destroy it. So this is where it gets into like, this is also good for core depletion. And there's other cards that will have other stuff that do it well. And it's really important to note here as well that it is not exhausted, like you will see a condition later on with a lot of different cards. So this is both a card that can surprise your opponent by deleting something that they left refreshed but only one core on it, and then you can also get back a curse unit. So all around, absolutely staple, 10 out of 10. Everyone's gonna be playing this card in some type of deck for the curse, that is, because again, the revival side of it, the level 2 effect is very good, and it might, depending on if we see value curse units, might find a home in those other 2 archetypes that we mentioned towards the beginning of the video. So love this card. The artwork is absolutely just gorgeous as well. I hope the foil looks good. Absolutely beautiful. Again, 10 out of 10. Getting into more of the cards that I'm honestly deathly afraid of is Pandemonium of the Dark World 7. So Dark World 7 is a theme that's going to continue to appear later on, both in this video and I'm sure in later sets. It's an 8 cost for 3, so again, very expensive, and its level 3 effect costs 6 cores. So again, we're seeing this very heavy top end for purple, who traditionally doesn't have any kind of ramp. They do have control options. They do have some stall options. Obviously, everyone's going to be playing Absolute Ice Shield, a card that we talked about in our community page, and also just a very good card anyway. So you can get to the late game, but again, this is a type of card that you're going to want to play on one turn. Maybe you're summoning at level 2, because you have enough cores, but you really have to wait until that next turn to pump it to level 3 and get the effect. So let's go through all this absolutely juicy on when destroyed effects, which you'll see a little bit why they're so good, the value that this can really generate. So the first one, select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits and destroy it. No restriction other than just being exhausted. So it could be a 1 cost, could be a 10 cost. Doesn't matter. If it's exhausted, it's dying. When destroyed, select one of your opponent's refreshed spirits, remove 3 cores from it, and place them into their reserve. So this is important because it's refreshed, which is usually something purple struggles with targeting, and it's stripping 3, which is a lot. And yes, it does go to the reserve, so they can still use it for spells or whatnot, but some of the other cards that we're going to see later really focus on just chipping away like 1 core at a time, so you can pretty easily set this up on your next turn to just get the second specifically destroyed ability here, use it with one of your other spirits, it'll strip that last core and then kill something else. So that's already killing 2 things, right? So maybe this guy attacks, you activate it with Nemesis, we'll talk about later, you destroy 2 things, maybe he took out a guy while he was swinging. That's already fine. And then the level 3, if you have 6 cores on it, both players discard 5 cards. So purple, again, loves drawing cards, loves getting stuff back from the graveyard. We have an insane Nexus that we're going to see later that's just going to fill up your hand very quickly. So purple discarding 5 cards kind of doesn't care, doesn't matter. Yes, it's going to hurt you sometimes, but you should have enough other ways with cards that are just recycling themselves, or as we're going to see later on with Immortality, there are cards that you just want to put in the graveyard anyway. So there is going to be a case where maybe it's more in set 2. You just want to discard cards because they need to come out of your graveyard. And a slower deck like, say, white is going to be hurting a lot by this because they're just going to have to discard some of their key spirits in hand because they're playing a slower deck and can't get them out fast enough. Now, yes, this is, again, a very expensive play, so maybe they've already gotten 1 or 2 of them out, but if their hand gets bricked up and they're only at all these 7, 8, and 9 drops that white has, you can kind of catch them off guard. So really do love this card. Again, it's expensive, but it is very, very strong. So this goes very obviously into the when destroyed or destroying aristocrats style of gameplay. And I'm really curious to see where this, particular spirit lines up with the rest of the meta, because I think it's just, it is a spicy, spicy boy. Moving on to more Serpent Sport, we have a 3 cost, 1 reduction Python. When the spirit attacks, draw a card if it has a soul core on it. Straightforward. Yes, it's weak. It goes up to 3K, which is not great, but when the spirit attacks, it's going to draw you a card. So this is just getting to cycle through your deck faster. As we just mentioned, right? You want to draw extra cards. There are going to be some instances where your opponent is just going to let you swing with this, right? Now, if you think back to the, Dragonic Assassin, I think it is, in the starter deck, I really like that one because it also has Curse, and yes, it is a little bit higher of an investment. You're probably running both, right? Yes, you want to have a certain limit on the number of spirits you play that care about their soul core, but that's only 2 different spirits. You can probably get away with that quite easily, right? That I think 2 play sets, so 8 cards. It shouldn't come up all that often that you're running into, a soul core issue where you can't get multiple effects. So very solid. it's going to cycle its card. If Serpent matters, which it will later, we'll talk about it. That's great too, but just overall it's doing what purple wants to do, right? Churn through your deck. It's a good chump blocker if you need it. Otherwise, it just replaces itself the first time it attacks. And when it gets to attack multiple times, you're plussing and do not care at all. More Serpents again, 3 cost with 2 reduction. Boa Trickdoor. This one is nice because it has Curse, so it can be played for only 1 with the cost reduction symbol, and has Curse at level 1, 2, and 3. One thing that, and then this is more of like a future video when I actually have time to go through and like build the deck and look at all the ratios and stuff. The Curse is a bit odd at like what level it activates. So some of them will be like 2 and 3, some of them will only be level 2. So this being 1, 2, and 3, I think already gives you kind of like a step up. So if you're playing Curse, this is definitely gonna be one of the like early staples that you go with. More 3 costs. Gotta love all these 3 costs. And 1 reduction, Magic Swordsman Dragonaga. When summoned, draw a card if you spend a soul core as part of the spirit's summoning cost. Again, great draw filter, replaces itself, really building into that, hey, I want to have a bunch of cards in hand idea, so you can discard them later on in the game if you're playing the aristocrat style of deck. What's interesting here, though, is that you do have to pay the soul core. So this is another one of those cards that the turn that you summon this, you're not getting the draw off the Naga Assassin or Python in this case, right? So that is kind of like a give and take. It is a Serpent, same problem that it goes to 3K, but this is nice that it immediately draws you that card instead of having to like wait through the attack. The thing is, Python can get you multiple card draws where this is limited with just its when summoned. So again, very solid. I think anything that has a ability to replace itself, especially has the ability to draw multiples, so this one, of course, only drawing 1, is going to be what type of cards purple wants to see. Early blocker, replaces itself, helps you find your more important magic or offensive spells if you want to get core drain. Just does a lot, and I think it's a very solid card. And then we have the one of the boss monsters that we mentioned early on, or Key Spirits, 8 cost, 3 reduction, Infernal King Cursed Dragon. This card I am very scared of as well. So comes in at 6,000 power at level 1, which is pretty strong. When summoned, remove 1 core each from all other spirits and place them into their owner's reserves. Then place a core from the void onto this spirit for each spirit destroyed by this effect. Now, I want to be very clear. It does say all other spirits, so it is your own stuff. Again, though, we have some cards that want to be destroyed. We want them in our graveyard. We want to get the ramp into purple, right? One of the things I mentioned with this style of deck is that it is very, very expensive to play some of these cards. So if we can destroy our opponent's spirits and we can ramp off that effect and then get the spirits that we want in our graveyard for later stuff, like Beldegor, which we're going to talk about in a few more spirits, that's great. This is doing everything that we want to do. And again, it does say by this effect, so it should trigger on your own stuff as well, because it's the Infernal King that's doing the effect and not like a gameplay based ruling, right? So getting ramp in purple is going to be quite strong. Yes, it is going to be very difficult to, sacrifice 3 spirits. And again, you can move the cores around however you want prior to playing this, so you can trigger that. But then you have to make sure you have some kind of follow-up, because if you just board wipe yourself and only kill like 2 of your opponent's spirits, while ramping up that much might sound nice, you need to make sure you have something on defense to do with it as kind of follow-up. And then because that's going to trigger, you're basically automatically going to get the level 2, or should be playing this in a board state where you automatically get the level 2. Select one of your opponent's spirits, remove all but 1 core from it, and place them into their reserve. This effect I love because, again, it's not exhausted, it's not refreshed, like there's no condition on that sort. It's just select 1 period, which is really important because, again, we're going to see other cards, or even just Dark King Snake Pinnacles, right? His level 2 on attack strips just 1 core to their trash. So this is clearly a card that when you combine it with the other spirits that have powerful on attack parts, or just again in that same turn, you are stripping out and killing multiple things when this card comes into play. This card is going to be nuts. The artwork is just gorgeous. I cannot wait to see this as a full art. I think it's going to be one of the best full arts, probably in set 1. I mean, it goes so hard and it does so much. So really looking forward to this card. Again, it's very expensive. You do have to kind of craft your board state to get the most value out of it. But this card slaps. I'm sure it's going to see play, and it's going to see play in a couple different options. And then what's nice, again, if you want to live the dream, as we just talked about, so 6 cost with 2 reduction is Dark Bishop Bacillus. There we go. When summoned, remove all but 1 core from all spirits and place them into their owner's reserves. So if you have the cores, and it was like 12 or whatever it is, quick math, and if you want to live the dream, and if you have like a Nexus and one other spirit in play, right, so you can get this guy's max reduction, you can technically go from Dark Bishop into the Cursed Dragon that we just talked about, ramped a ton, and board wipe, and then probably because you just ramped a bunch of cores off of killing everything else, if you have a few other spirits in your hand, and if they don't have things like an absolute ice shield, or if they don't have like some kind of trigger effect to kill one of your spirits, there's a good chance that you just can wipe the board and then kill your opponent or get them near dead with this combo. So again, super spicy, very, very expensive to pull it off, but it's so cool and it's going to feel great when you get to do it. So this is again one of those things that, like, what I really love about Battle Spirits and what they've really done well in like their 15-year history is it's not just, hey, and I'm sorry to use Digimon as the example, but I think it's kind of like, if you strip the IP away from it, it's what it is, right? It's like, cool, I really love Alphamon, let's build an Alphamon deck, right? And that's kind of like your self-build strategy that you have to do. In Battle Spirits and Battle Spirits Saga, it's like, hey, I really love this Infernal Curse Dragon, and now I have all of purple to pull from because there are just like generic good cards in purple. Like, do you want to focus more on the discarding and the core depletion? Do you want to draw extra cards? Do you want to splash another color so you can have like the draw power in red, or maybe you want the defensive nature of white, right? But you can build the deck however you want around that one or two key spirits in this example. And I really think that Dark Bishop is going to do a good job of like really selling like just the more fun, casual, like dropping bombs and like having this really cool chain of effects like pop off. Like, I know everyone's really focused on the competitive side. Obviously, Bandai's pushing it. The $1 million prize pool is pushing it and all that stuff. But there is just legitimately fun stuff that you can do in this game, like Dark Bishop into the Cursed Dragon. Like, at least to me, and this might be just the control player showing, but blow up the board and then like get all these cores and then summon more spirits. Like, it creates like an anime moment, like, just to use that example, right? But it's just so cool to see this all come together so early in set one, where it's not just like, oh, here's my key spirit, like the white spoilers we're going to talk about, right? Like Dim Dyna, or whatever his name got changed to, I'm totally blanking out now, right? Like, he's a very much like, oh, cool, I'm a Gundam, I play a bunch of Nexus, I make a bunch of stuff unblockable, swing for game, right? Like, it's just very linear in like what it wants to be doing. Where now what we've seen here in purple, which is fine, don't get me wrong, I know some people are probably take that out of context, but that's fine too. But I really do like having more like the self-expression and like combo interaction side that we do have here from purple, and also some of the other cards I talked about in red. So love this. Obviously, it's a bit difficult to see how many copies you're going to run, how much of the core depletion spirits do you have. I'm really curious to see what these ratios end up at, but this card's very, very strong, and it's definitely going to see play, and I think it's going to make a lot of people both really happy that they get the core depletion side of things, and just really upset at the same time when they're on the other side of it. Moving on from there, we have our 7-drop with 3 reduction Dread Knight Nemesis, another card that I absolutely love, and again goes into that aristocrat or self-destruction style of gameplay. So level 1, 2, and 3, when he attacks, select one of your spirits and destroy it to activate one of the following effects. Select one of your opponent's spirits, place up to 2 cores from it into their reserve. So again, this is not restricted like some of the other depletion stuff in purple. So you definitely have to make sure you're reading your cards very carefully for that. Or draw 2 cards. So again, just another card that can combo very, very well with like the Dark World 7 that we talked about. And then you're like killing 3 things in one turn. Your opponent discarded 5 cards, like insanely strong combos you can pull off. But just in general, then we have cards that we're going to want to like cycle to our graveyard and later on with like set 2 and whatnot, where immortality is going to be a bigger thing. So getting to sack those for free, draw 2 cards, and then bring them back on the next turn, that's great. And we're going to see a lot more of that, I'm sure, very soon. So I love this card, like from someone who really likes the more attrition side of gameplay and really drawing it out and just getting that incremental advantage turn over turn. This card is pretty spicy. And this is, I think, from purple standpoint, this is probably where I'm going to start for my first purple deck. Because again, I think the full art is going to be insane. Reminds me a lot of Odin from Final Fantasy. And I really like the effect. And then level 2 and level 3, when destroyed, your opponent selects one of their spirits and destroys it. So this is really important too, because the exact wording, right? Your opponent selects, it's not you select. So it should technically get around purple armor restrictions and things like that, much like Deadly Balance that we'll talk about later. So that's going to be really interesting to see where the CR rules it out and what type of like details that it's really going to care about in the wording and what gets around armor and what doesn't. But if this gets around armor, that's going to be a very, very strong effect for your opponent that's sitting behind a wall of like an 8 cost, an 8 cost, and a 9 cost, or whatever the Enterprise costed again. So love this card. There it is. Durham Dyna is the name that it got changed to, is the White Gundam guy. So really love, again, the Aristocrat style. It's drawing you cards in a pinch, which, again, purple just wants to draw more cards, so sure. But all around, very spicy card. Definitely going to be seen in play. And then finally, one of the cards that I am most excited about, and it might not make that much of a splash in set 1, but I definitely think this is something to keep an eye on. And again, if you want to, hunt out the foils and, sit on them and speculate, whatever, what have you, this is definitely a card to do it. So Beldegor, the Dark World 7, again, Dark World 7 make an appearance, 3 costs, 1 reduction. During either attack step, immortal costs 4 or 5. You may summon the spirit from your trash when one of your other spirits that costs 4 or 5 are destroyed. So yes, it is very limited. That does have to be 4 or 5. Again, it doesn't care what color it is. So if we get like burst spirits in the very near future that have level 4 and cost 4 and 5, it'll get him back. And the important note to here is that you do have to pay the cost. So yes, you will have to pay, well, you'll have another purple spirit on the field, obviously, but you'll pay 2 cores, put 1 on him. But then when summoned, select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits. It costs 4 or fewer and destroy it. So yes, this will hopefully kill something on enter that maybe your opponent just blocked with. And now, because you're in the attack step, this can keep swinging. So it really puts your opponent in an interesting board state where, your 4 cost dies, cores go to the trash, you bring this guy back, put the cores on him that you just got back right freely, attack with him, maybe he dies again, goes back to the graveyard, go back to your main steps, your attack steps, swing with one of your other main 4 drops or 5 drops that are still up, that dies, you get the cores back, bring this guy back from the graveyard, right? And it creates like this multi-attack shenanigans. And I'm assuming that if you have multiple of these in the graveyard, right, their own effects are going to trigger, right? So if you have enough cores, now you're getting multiple of these back. So I think this card's nuts. Cost 4 or less might not seem like that much, but that hits a lot in this game. So I definitely expect this to be a very annoying and problematic card that a lot of people deal with. Yes, it's not free, so there is a cost associated with it. But again, you are getting those cores back from the spirits that are dying as you're bringing these guys out. So eventually you're going to run out, and yes, it will leave you defenseless if you go through the entire combo and swing out, where they could just ice shield you on the last one and then kill you on the crackback. But I think just having this as a threat in your graveyard is going to be very, very spicy. So again, a card that I'm very excited about. 5 cost, 2 reduction, Dark Knight Mordred. This goes back again for the core depletion side. When summoned, select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits, remove 2 cores from it and place it into their reserve. So again, this does have to be exhausted. So that is an important note here, where some of the other ones we've talked about so far have just been either refreshed or didn't state, right? So please, please, please be mindful. It's very easy to get tripped up on what the conditions are for each one of these. So always double check. And then when the spirit attacks, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove a core from it, and place it into their reserve. So that second one, right, as we just talked about with the Cursed Dragon, sometimes you're just going to leave them down to 1, or the Dark Bishop, you strip them all down to 1. Maybe you don't have the Cursed Dragon that turn, right? But if you have multiple Dark Knight Mordreds on the board, and you're able to get them both at level 2, right? It just doesn't care if it's refreshed or exhausted, whatever. Just straight up select one of your opponents, remove a core, and place in their reserve. So this can combo with Dark Bishop as well and just kill stuff. And spoiler, it is a 5-drop, so it is going to help get you back the Beldegor, which we talked about. So very spicy card. Again, all the rares have just been very, very good so far, it seems, that we've seen. And again, it goes really well into the core depletion and getting Beldegor back. So love this card. Another one I think is going to be an absolute staple for the core depletion side of things. A card I'm not as excited about, though. 4 costs with 1 reduction, Dark Knight Palomides. So this one is interesting because it gives us like an extension of the rules or something else you can do with it. When the spirit attacks, select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits. You may attack that spirit. So we're going to talk later about Guillotine, which buffs all shadows. But this card by itself at 2, 4, and 6 at its various power levels is not exciting. Now, if we see more shadow buffs, shadow spirits matter, and like anthem effects for shadows, or like other creatures that spirits that buff shadow spirits, cool, great. But at 6,000 for 6 cores, that is a hefty investment to that's where you're starting to actually kill stuff you would probably care about. So you might surprise somebody as like a 1 or a 2 of in some lists, but unless we see more support for like Guillotine that we're going to talk about later, I'm really just very, very low on this card for its effect. I think it can be and will be strong later on, but for right now, the power level just does not match up with where you want to be. Camelot Knight, 1-drop, 1 cost. Another card that does care about its Soul Core, which again, we have seen quite a bit that does care about Soul Core and Curse so far. But if it has a Soul Core on it, it gains while the spirit attacks Curse. So it's a 1-drop. You play it early, helps with your cost reduction. If you need Curse in a pinch, right, with the Soul Core, it does that too. So yeah, it's probably just a card that you're playing anyways in the Curse deck. Not much to say about it. It's common. It's adorable. I love the artwork, but yeah, it's a 1-drop with Curse that does what you want it to do. 2 cost, 1 reduction. Shield Knight Gardener. During your opponent's attack step, refresh the spirit when one of your purple spirits is destroyed. Another one that's a little bit weird, right? It's a 3 cost, 3 for 3 and 6 for 6. It is a shadow, which hasn't mattered just yet for like an archetype that builds out itself. It is a strong effect that you get to refresh the spirit, but you have to make sure that it lives first. So another card that, you know, you can't even put in the 2 cost rush deck because you're not going to have purple. So maybe yellow, purple, 2 cost rush is a thing. But then this guy cares about purple spirits. Like, there's just nothing about this right now with the spoilers that we've seen that I'm too excited about. Probably something that can be insane with more shadow support around the corner if we see it in set 2, but right now just overall not a fan. And cool effect, costs too much to have relevant power thresholds, so probably won't see much play. Moving on from there, we have our 3 cost, 2 reduction, Dark Knight Aglovale. So this one I do like. So when destroyed, draw a card if it has a Soul Core on it. So again, you can play it for 1 with a 2 reduction. And then while the spirit attacks at level 2, it gains Curse. So again, Curse card that's drawing itself, replacing. It's going to kill something. It's easy and cheap to play. You put a couple of Nexus down. You get both cost reductions. Like, it's just great. Obviously, I think you really have to get that second core on him to get the most value. But at the end of the day, we need some density of Curse units in our deck, and this kind of checks all the boxes that we would expect to. Easy aggro threat, will replace itself when destroyed, and can get Curse. That's great. Dark Lancer Cavalier, 4 cost, 2 reduction. When summoned, draw a card. Again, just straight up draw. It's good early blocker. We'll see how much like the extra draw itself matters, because now we're getting like, yes, it's a 4-drop, which works really well with Beldegor, which I think is like the best part about this. So like, you're probably playing it in the Beldegor deck, so you can find him, discard him, and then it's also a 4 cost that triggers it. So like, all of that is fine. But again, going up to only 6k power, it does feel a little bit limited in that regard. But again, it is drawing a card. It's replacing itself right away. So it helps you dig deeper into finding things like the Cursed Dragon or Dark Bishop. So for that, it's probably just good enough. And I know some people are going to be torn on this, but I really do love like the old school dark fantasy style that we've seen on so many cards in purple, and I'm eating it up. I wish this had a full art. It would probably be absolutely gorgeous. The foil is probably going to be amazing. Cannot wait. And then for another big boy, 7 cost, 4 reduction, Phantasm Archking Zenith. When the spirit attacks, Curse at 4,000 power and 8,000 for 4 cores. And then the interesting part is level 2. All your spirits with Curse cannot be blocked by your opponent's level 1 spirits. So this is another one of those things where like, this awkwardly goes very well with Dark Bishop, because you can just send your opponent's entire board to level 1 with this effect, and they can't do anything about it. So like, this is a really spicy 2 of. And I don't like it for its right for the curse when attack. Like, that's kind of whatever. Obviously, it matters for his level 2, but he's going to go up to 8,000 power at that point. So he's probably, my point is, he's probably hitting through whatever he needs to at 8,000 power anyways. Or you can save him for the last attack, which you have to do, and then he's living anyways because he's the last attack that you have to do with him to make sure that Anthem effect stays in play. So very spicy. This is another card where it's like, okay, I really like what they're doing here. Obviously, some amount of depletion is going to matter. Or if you're just playing, again, the Dark Bishop, get it done that way, right? So there's a lot of these really cool combos that you can pull off that I think Purple has a lot of interesting strategies that they have going for them. And again, I absolutely love this artwork. I'm sure the foiling is going to be gorgeous, but I'm really curious, like, do we have room for 2 of, like, right? So Maduka is going to be a 3 of. I think that's like pretty locked in. This would be like a 2 of, because like you have to see certain combos with it. But then are you really going to give up like 5 to 6, whatever that is, slots in your main deck to like have this combo happen? Probably. It's pretty spicy, I'll admit. And then you can always sideboard it out, right? If for whatever reason your opponent is just playing like I don't even know what they'd be playing to get around that because it's pretty strong effect because it doesn't target, right? If I remember correctly, it's just a blanket effect, so armor doesn't save you. Yeah, it's kind of nuts. Like, at least on paper, I think it's a very cheeky combo that when the board like kind of stalls out, that can just win you the game out of nowhere. So I like it. Probably gonna kill some people, and I think it's a very strong card for what it wants to be doing. Again, the curse is kind of whatever because you want to attack last with him, but again, I think it does a wonderful job of what it wants to be doing. But it's probably just like a 1 of 2 of in your main deck because it costs so much. 2-drop, 1-cost Devilish Prankster Imp. During your attack step, select one of your opponent's spirits. When one of your shadow spirits reduces your opponent's life, remove a core from it, place in your reserve. I could do a longer video on this part where it's just like, oh, here's the shadows and like here's like the couple of different purple combo interactions that you can do. The short version is it's probably too cute to care in set 1. Like having this out, having a relevant shadow, this card itself can't attack. Hardly ever unless it's like the last one because it only goes up to 3,000 power. So just not impressed. Like one of the main things I've seen from purple within this first set, like there's a ton of great stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think everything overall from the 3 decks I've talked about, and there's obviously probably a 4th deck that fits in there. That's all great. The shadow stuff, I'm not convinced like just the shadow stuff there is enough for set 1, but set 2 and 4 like could be very, very spicy. So hold on to this, kick it in the back burner. If we get more shadow support in set 2, then great. And then 4 cost of 2 reduction, Earth Spider Demon. When the spirit attacks, if it has a soul core on it, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove a core from it and place it into their reserve. So again, it's not restricted here. It does require the soul core on it, which means you're not drawing off those other cards that we've talked about. But again, just core shooting a ton of stuff is going to help break up the board, kill a couple of your opponent's spirits, and just play into that like attrition style that purple wants. So good card for that. Curious to see where this ends up because I haven't like built the depletion deck yet, but probably makes the cut just because you want more stuff that can freely trigger that core depletion and can fundamentally change how your opponent plays the game when they have to start stacking on 2 and 3 cores on each one of their spirits. Then they can't go as wide, right? And for purple, that usually wants to stall at the game and go to the late game. That's probably fine. Moving on to our Nexus, the 4 cost of 2 reduction, Abandoned Guillotine. During your attack step, all your shadow spirits gain 2,000 BP. So again, like, yes, you're helping, I think it was like Mordred, who's like weaker in attack, but like his when summon is mostly what you want. And then like if he gets off 1 attack, that's value enough. The rest of your shadows have curse, so you don't care about their BP. It plays around things like Landmine, which I guess can be cool. So maybe that's a sideboard consideration. Like all around this like level 0 effect is just, or sorry, level 1 for 0 cost effect was just like, eh. Like I think we'll see more shadow stuff in set 2 and then it gets way better. However, the second part, during your start step, if none of your opponent's spirits are exhausted, select one of them, remove all but one of its cores and place them into your opponent's reserve. So this part I do love. Against the white matchup, they're just not going to attack you. They are going to build a wall until the turn where they can win or slowly burn you to death with Elk and just not care. They will not attack you. So this is finally a way to like punish white for not attacking, because then it also plays into the core depletion side of things where they only have 1 on them, right? Mummy Mura kills it. Mordred kills it. The Infernal the Cursed Dragon kills it. Like stripping it down to 1 is wild. That this puts pressure on them. Now again, the downside of this is the Curse deck, or most of the shadows by nature are not good on defense. So it's like a really strong give and take that you have to have with this one. So I'm really curious to see where it ends up. Is it just a sideboard card that you leave as an option for white? Is there going to be better options? And then will we get more shadow cards in set 2 that make use of that 2,000 power? But really curious to see where this level 2 shakes out. But there are also a lot of strong purple Nexus cards that I can see where this could just get hard stuck in the sideboard and doesn't come on in for a lot of matchups. Now, an absolutely insane card is for a 6 cost 3 reduction is Netherworld Depths. Draw a card when one of your opponent's spirits is exhausted. This is attacking. This is blocking. It does not care whose turn it is. You are drawing cards, and that is nuts. Again, if they're playing white, you're only going to draw the cards when you attack, so you're not going to be able to like play extra spirits or anything, but you might get a magic card which can then be a battle trick, or it could be like an ice shield that gives you another turn, right? There's a lot of different things that this one Nexus can be doing that's going to be a must delete threat against a lot of decks. And then during your attack step, when one of your spirits is blocked, you may pay 1 core from this Nexus to destroy your opponent's blocking spirit when the battle ends. Now, this one is important because you do have to maintain the level 2. So technically, you're going to want like 5 or 6 cores on this in a lot of cases, which is a very heavy investment, to be fair. Like, especially when we talked about, Curse or seen some of the other like when summon effects, but are lower in battle power, like they require a lot of cores to get their level 2 and level 3. So the value in this Nexus is absolutely all in the level 1. And then the level 2 is just like, if we matter, if we get here, cool. And honestly, that's probably what you want a lot of your Nexus cards to be anyways. You want them to have value on that level 0 or level 1. I keep calling it level 0 because it costs 0. Level 1 that you care about. And this kind of checks all the boxes. And again, this is, really, really hard to play outside of purple. I think 6 is just way too much to splash ever. But in purple, this is going to be a staple Nexus, I have to imagine, for quite some time. So again, definitely foils if you want to speculate on it or just to grab them. I think foils of this are going to be absolutely nuts. Now, less exciting, Nexus cards. 3 cost, 2 reduction, Ancient Amethyst Palace. So when placed, discard the top card of your deck. If it is not a spirit, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove a core from it, and place in the reserve. So like, Battle Spirits by nature is a spirit heavy deck, so that just kind of sucks straight up. So if we get more stuff that's like immortal in the future and you want that self-mill, like sure, but right now, no, not exciting. The level 2 though, when one of your purple spirits is destroyed, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove a core from it and place it into their reserve. So this is like the other side where it gets interesting, right? It's an early Nexus. The level 2 doesn't cost that much. And if you get into a board state where you have a bunch of go wide spirits and then you leave your last attackers for like a when they attack strip a core or something, then you're suddenly getting into a board state where it's like no matter what, your opponent's going to die because they can't afford to block the early spirits that you're attacking with. Because if they do, you're going to able to double strip the cores before they move to blockers. But if they take those, they're dying anyway. So like that's kind of cool, but I feel like that's just like we've seen so much stronger core depletion effects and like combos that you can pull off that I don't think that's going to be as important. I'd be curious if I'm wrong, but this is another Nexus where I feel like it's just not meant for set 1, and we have such better options both in the starter or the Nexus that we just talked about. Like Smoke Valley is still insane in my mind. That this is another one I'm just not all that excited about, but it could have a place in a future set. Moving on from there, we have Rotting Swamp, the 4 cost with 2 reduction. During your attack step, draw a card when one of your spirits is destroyed. Just straight up draw a card. Sure, cool. And then once per turn, it does cost 3. When one of your serpent spirits would be destroyed, you may discard a card to return it to your hand instead. So again, this is just something that like lets you get back your serpent spirits. When this card resolves, like you draw that card. So like you still draw it, see if you want it or not. And then guess what? If you don't want that card, just discard it, get your serpent back. And spoiler, Dark King Snake is a serpent himself. So now we found a way to get his when summoned multiple times and just delete multiple spirits that your opponent might have. So I really like this Nexus. It is expensive, but it does allow us to have that like early game play. It costs 4, so you can play it on turn 1, pass, whatever. And then during our attack step, if we're just like trying to get a cursed guy through for value or just getting chip damage, like we're fine drawing the card then, right? Or again, if we're just playing like Python, it draws a card when it attacks, it's going to die. We'll draw another card. Sure, cool. We just got a replacement that way. So this is another card that I was like, okay, the level 2 is pretty spicy for what can it allow in set 1. So I'm really curious to see where this one ends up. It's only a common too, which is crazy. But I think if you build like Serpents the deck, right, you're going to find a home for this because the effect is very, very strong. Speaking of strong cards that I'm absolutely terrified of is Deadly Balance. So 3 costs with 2 reduction. Main or flash, your opponent selects one of their spirits, then select one of your spirits, destroy both. So again, wonderful. It will, again, based on the current wording and what we assume, because it's your opponent just choosing it and not you selecting it, it should get around armor, which is already great. We get to choose what we're destroying, right? So your opponent can attack, we go to block, we assign the block, flash step opens, we say Deadly Balance, and if we have like another on destroy effect, or like maybe that spirit has an on destroy effect, we're not only going to be able to shut off that attack, and they probably just have to like select their own spirit. Like if it's a low value spirit, they would select that own spirit to delete, or if they attacked with their big thing first, like their key spirit, now we've caught them in a situation where it's like, okay, well, this is considered block, does not matter. I'm sacrificing this guy, and now you lose another attacker, or you lose your key spirit. Probably going to lose another attacker, but remember, with all those other cards that we had that get value out of being destroyed, now suddenly we're popping off. We're destroying multiple things. Your opponent's discarding 5 cards out of their hand. Like, this card does a lot. I am legitimately afraid of it. I think it's going to be nuts. I think that as we get more destroy effects in set 2, in set 3, again, just kind of going forward, I think this card is just going to be getting better. So absolutely one of the cards that's on my radar. I think that for like purple control and for purple like dirtling out, does everything you want it to do. And it's going to be very, very spicy. So definitely look forward to this one. I think it's going to be playing in a lot of purple decks. Then we have a burst card, a burst venom, 4 cost, 2 reduction. When the burst condition is when opponent destroys your spirit, select 1 spirit, remove all but 1 core from it and place it into their owner's reserve. And you then may play the flash, which is a 2k burst. Which is interesting about this one. It's both offensive and defensive. So you can be attacking, right? You attack with your chump dude first, you don't care. Or maybe it's, again, a cursed spirit. Your cursed spirit's going to die. You kill their guy with a curse effect. This is going to trigger, right? You're going to be able to remove one of their other guys down to 1 core, and then you can attack with one of your spirits that strips that last core to prevent them from a blocker. Or on defense, right? You just block with whatever you don't care about, strip one of their other guys down to 1, and then you have like a poison shot or something else that gets you that last bit of damage or the last core off that spirit. Or sometimes you just want to level down their spirit so they don't get that strong on attack level 2 or level 3 effect. And that's fine too. So purple has a lot of good magic, and I'm not sure where all this is fitting yet, if I'm being honest, but burst venom is another card where, like, the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, this one is definitely going to see some play somewhere because I think it's a very strong option to have. From there, we have Poison Mist, which is a 5 cost reduction. During your turn, your cursed spirits gain. When the spirit attacks, select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits. You may attack that spirit. I like this one because it gives us the option to like clear the board with our cursed spirits that then could like draw and replace them. But then like otherwise, I guess the 3k buff on it's nice. This one's very like situational, I feel. It's not something I'm as excited about because curse is probably going to play a game where you're playing, again, attrition heavy. There's only a couple spirits on board for both players or they're at low life. And this just shouldn't matter. So this card, again, is either going to be like unplayable because it doesn't matter for how curse actually plays out, or it's going to be one of your best cards in your sideboard because the way, like, if they block with something big, then you can curse and crash into it. So it acts as removal that way. But again, it's going to require you have such a large board setup for curse to like really get the max value out of this. So I'm going to rate this low initially and not all that excited for it, but I very well could be proven wrong on this one. Core Theft seems nuts. So 4 costs, 3 reduction, main flash, select one of your opponent's spirits, then discard any number of your cards and place 1 core from that spirit in trash for each card you discarded. So again, we want some cards to go to the graveyard anyways. That's fine. And if it's just a problematic spirit, let's just, combo this with one of our other cards that sends it down to 1 core, and then we're only discarding 1 card, and that's perfectly fine. Or in a pinch because of flash, let's just strip it out. Yes, maybe we have to discard 4 cards from our hand, but if it keeps you alive and it lets you win the game on the next turn, that's probably fine as well. So card seems insane. It's really going to depend on how much card draw you can cycle through in purple, but I wouldn't be surprised if this thing sees some amount of play split between main deck and sideboard because it just feels like a very strong option to have at your disposal. And then for our last burst is Dark Matter. 4 costs with 2 reduction. Burst is when you lose life. Select a spirit that costs 4 or fewer from your trash and return it to hand. And then you can pay the cost to activate the main, which is destroy a cost 4 or fewer spirit. Exhausted spirit, excuse me. So this one I have like really mixed feelings on. Again, because purple already has so many good bursts that you want to be playing. And when the lose life condition can also be kind of tricky depending on how your board state's looking. But it doesn't say purple 4 costs. So that one's really interesting because, again, there might be just something else that we want to revive. I do like it because it plays very well into the Beldegor theme where it's like you want to bring back a 4 cost so you can play it and then trigger the Beldegors from your graveyard again. So, like, I think you have to play it in that regard because it, like, helps that engine stay alive. And then the Exhausted Spirit that costs 4 or fewer. Again, in purple, playing this for 2, gas, absolutely fine. Playing this outside of purple, probably not. Like, I think that's just way too much for the effect. Unless we see some absolutely cracked 4 drop that a certain deck always wants to see and play as many times as possible, then you're probably playing it for the burst. But otherwise, feel kind of a medium on where this is going to sit. But again, if you're playing the Immortality for deck, then this seems insane. Like the when summon guy that draws a card that's a 4 cost, just loop that guy and you're probably happy. And with that, after a very long video, finally getting to the end of purple. So again, kind of just like my key cards I'm the most excited for, which I'm trying not to use the X rares a lot of times because like those are just given because that's a deck. But as I mentioned several times, Beldegor of the Dark World 7 seems like an absolute staple, something that probably only gets better as future sets go on. Netherworld Depths, I love drawing cards, and that card is going to draw you so many cards over the course of a game. And then Deadly Balance. I am definitely afraid of this card, and I think it's going to be an absolute meta staple for a while, especially the decks that get punished for being slower and only have like 1 or 2 threats on the board. This is going to be like the key gotcha card coming out of the sideboard, or again, just main deck. Like I think it's, if you're playing like the Destruction or Aristocrat style of deck, this is just a main deck card, and it slaps because you get the most value possible out of this one card. So with that, that is our purple review, and I know these are going to run longer, but I do like to ramble and talk about like the niche interactions and like where I could see the cards going. So I do apologize for that, but white is going to be coming up very, very soon. We should be done with white spoilers by what's today? Thursday. So Saturday, I think, should be the last of white spoilers, getting into yellow. And our early adopter event at Loot Card Shop is this weekend. So I'm gonna be a little bit busy. So again, white review will be probably Sunday or Monday. We're going to move straight into History of Dawn or BSS-01 testing because our partner for the starter decks was unfortunately out, and I wish them well and good luck with the surgery. So it might take us a little while to get proxies, but definitely look forward to that. And then, of course, once we have all of yellow spoiled, we'll get that video out for that. And obviously, that's my favorite color. I'm looking forward to it the most. So tons of great stuff coming there, hopefully, in the near future. So with that, let me know what your favorite card is in purple and what deck you're looking to start with. Do you want to play the aggressive curse and really just attack with very deadly threats from your opponent? Are you most excited for the Destruction or Aristocrat and making sure your opponent doesn't have a board? Or do you just want to deplete things and pull off crazy combos that can lead to OTKs if you set it up properly? And if your opponent doesn't have a response, definitely let me know in the comments below. But with that, my friends, stay hydrated, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.